Now that you know that I'm an expert in fine lathe work, we're now going to install the balustrades on the pin rails, both on the forward and on the aft mast. But before we can do that, we need to just remind you that it only takes less than 6 seconds to build a baluster. And here are a number of them made out of various different types of wood, along with the 2 pin rails that have been supplied, one by the kit and one that was laminated by me. Back to our pin rails, we use this lathe tool to establish the center of the rings. It's very useful. And then simply go on the table saw. In this case I'm using the pre-arc because I have a small slitting blade available. There's no magic here. I think the only thing you have to be careful is that you don't split the rail, because once you put one cut on one side, the other side there's a space and it's vulnerable. And now creating the starter holes, which we're going to use the drill press and drill. And the drill press does not go all the way through the pin top rail. It stops about half of a millimeter shy, and this allows a nice clean top rail when you install it. I used CA to put the balusters onto the top rail, simply because, again, I wanted to get everything accurate and sort of instant, and I didn't want to take a chance of it moving. And then creating the holes, again, you need to spend a lot of time making sure that you don't make a mistake and drill the hole in the wrong place, line up everything, and then drilling the holes. You need to make sure that the holes that you drill are a little big. We also, instead of using CA now to install the pieces, we actually used PVA. Again, it's giving us more working time, and we just cleaned up afterwards with a brush to make sure that any spillage wouldn't be seen. And I could criticize, no matter how hard you try to line up things, sometimes they go off just a slight bit, but nothing fatal, and I think they came out very good. We had some problems with the pin rail. The one that was supplied with the kit was 3 millimeters wide, and when we tried to fit the belaying pins in the pin rail, the size of the hole required was much too big. So we had to add a little laminate in place, which effectively increased the size to 4 millimeters. The other problem we had is that when we put the belaying pin in, which you probably won't see, and you push it all the way down, there's not sufficient pin below the pin rail. So we're going to increase the length of the belaying pin just by 0.5 of a millimeter. In the case of the pin rail that I made up, it was actually a little bit wider, and so we were able to drill the holes, but we had the same issue because I made it the same thickness as the one supplied in the kit, assuming that was correct. And again, I'm not sure if you can see it, but the pin is not going down far enough. So we're going to make some green heart belaying pins, and we'll make the pins for this just a little bit longer. In terms of building technique, the only thing that is significant that I would suggest is when you're drilling these pinholes, obviously you pre-mark them, then you drill with a smaller bit, and then you drill with the larger bit. But in terms of fitting, that you use a very small round file and gently open up each hole, just like this, so that you don't make the holes too big. Having said that, we're probably going to stick the belaying pins into the holes. The more we use the lathe, the easier it gets. But one thing I've realized as we went along is that the tools have to be kept quite sharp. The green heart that was used here was constantly dulling the tool, and you start to see a deflection each time you put the tool, particularly towards the unsupported end, and you quickly run into problems and end up breaking the part. So I've been keeping the tools extra sharp and the speed on the lathe very, very high. And let's see how that comes out. Now we can get a rope around the bottom of that belaying pin. I've developed this little gadget to help me fast track the measurements. It's a 2.2 millimeter hole for the blank and a 1.1 millimeter hole for the end of the belaying pin. These are the two holes, the main size of the working stock and the end of the belaying pin. And this is from the end of the belaying pin to where the handle starts, and this is the length of the belaying pin in total. So we just slide that over. That's one, and push that in, and that's two. Of course, we're just timing this to give you a feel of how long it takes to make the belaying pins, and really in half a day you can make all the pins that you need. The green heart pins are all complete, and we have a few spare just in case. We've painted the forward skylight as per the instruction, and the same thing on the scratch built model. We use little pieces of brass strip to make the mullion that holds the glass in place. We're getting to the end of the deck build, and we are now doing the scratch built forward deck house instead of the grating. I didn't show you this when we were building the first deck house. To get the slope of the roof, we cover the existing structure with greaseproof paper. I'm using Scotch tape, and then we're going to place the planks on top of this to get the shape. So the first thing we do is we need to taper one side of the plank, which we'll do on this sanding board. And as you can see, we've lined them all up, sanding one side and balancing them, and then we'll push them in and we'll stick them with CA. We've done bits of this, so we're not going to really repeat it. The time lapse really will take us through everything that you need to do. The key really is to try and get the fitting of the various pieces as close to possible to help with the cleanup. If you do a good job, then there's not going to be a lot of fine cleanup. Having said that, the cover did need to be reduced in size, so we had no problem putting it on the main sander to get it down. The other thing that I'll remind you is that when you join pieces and you have the graining exposed, it's important to lock this, so we laminated a piece onto the ends to achieve some level of security. We're going to try to attempt to make the hatch cover actually move, slide, and even though we won't have the hole in it, and we're not going to paint it black, we just want to prove that it can be done at this scale. The first thing we had to do was to make up the hatch rails, and this is done on the table saw, again being very careful not to damage your fingers. Once they're there and cleaned up, you can check them out and make sure the thing works, and then we stuck it with CA, and it really worked absolutely tremendously. Here we are, all complete, and here is my sliding hatch cover. The irony of it is I just did this to prove that it could be done, but I have full intention of gluing it in place, since it really will serve no purpose. At this scale, there's lots of challenges, lots of tiny little cracks that you need to be very careful of and repair them as soon as you can. So I'm very happy to put this change to the scratch-built model. I think it will reflect the boat as it crossed the Atlantic and went to race in England to bring home the America's Cup for the first time.